Hey everybody, it's Jo Parra, founder of the Ladies Working Dog Group. Are you feeling stuck with your gun dog training? Trust me, you're not alone, and that's exactly why you need to be here. Every week, we're bringing you the best tips and hacks to make training your gun dog easy peasy. We'll keep it straightforward, no fuss, just actionable guidance that you can put straight to use. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of Found It, Fetched It. This week we're going to be talking about our close companions but distant behaviour, understanding why dogs act differently when away from their owners. Joining me for this week's podcast is the amazing LWDG group expert Claire Denia. How are we today, Claire?
Hello, Jo. I'm very well, thank you very much. And how are you doing?
I'm good, and I'm very interested in this conversation because I think this is something we see quite a lot in our members. In fact, this podcast was prompted by somebody who was saying, my dog's good when near me, but not at distance, the behavior changes. So can we start off by talking about some of the reasons why your dog can be good with you, but a little bit distant and a little bit elusive when away from you?
So this could go two ways, actually. So it's a really interesting topic and conversation because genuinely, I see issues at distance for various reasons. So sometimes you might find that the dog is too clingy to the handler and wants to be really near them. So getting them away from you is the problem. But sometimes you have the opposite end of the scale, where actually the dog loves being away from the handler, no offense to the handler there, but loves being away and is too independent. And so once they're away from the handler, they stop listening. Equally, sometimes we see dogs who, when they're away from the handler, are so desperate to get something done for the handler, they stop listening. So this could go various ways, depending on the dog and its personality, and also what the training is that you're doing when this happens. Distance usually comes into play with recall, with a stay at distance, with a stop whistle at distance, and handling at distance. They're usually the things where I get contacted by clients about issues at distance. And that's either issues getting the dog at distance or issues when the dog is at distance. It's a huge topic.
And I'm sure we will cover it in depth. I think for a lot of people, if you look anywhere online, if you look, I don't know, Groupon, Voucher, wherever, there's about 3,000 courses on how to get your dog to recall, right? So the problem with a dog being a distance is not a scarce one. It's something a lot of people will struggle with. Let's start by talking about how the bond between the dog and the owner are going to influence their behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the bond. Let's just say the dog is very clingy to the handler. That's the best way of describing it. I can't think of a better word in the moment. So the dog is very clingy. So the handler in that incident might struggle with getting the dog to stay away from them for any duration of time. And so building a solid stay at distance or a stop whistle at distance can be a struggle for that sort of handler, because the dog just wants to get back to the handler. They want to get back as quickly as they possibly can to be round their legs. They're really needy, really clingy. So the dog in those scenarios really needs to have its confidence built in being away from the handler. Now, most often, not always, but most often, the dogs that I see this in are the dogs who live in the home and follow their owners around all day and sit with their owners all day and are curled on their feet all day. So the dog, even in the home, doesn't necessarily have a very good understanding and ability to be away from the owner. So that then seeps into the training on the field. The dog's like, I'm always around you. I'm always near your feet. I follow you everywhere. I follow you to the bathroom. I follow you while you're cooking. I lay at your feet while you're eating. So those dogs very often are going to struggle when you try and put distance in on the training on the field.
So there we're talking about, it's like almost a psychological factor. It's almost a visual separation anxiety.
Yeah, it's literally like the dog is so used to clinging on to the handler's legs, to being right on top of them, that when you try and show them a training scenario where they're away from the handler, the dog just can't cope. The dog is, I just don't understand why you suddenly don't want me with you, and feel quite lost about that. And the most common symptoms that I see of that is when people are trying to train a sit stay. And I always say to people, build the duration first before you put the distance in. Because if your dog can't cope with the duration of time sitting with you, the minute you start moving away, the dog's just going to follow you. They're just going to follow you. So you have to get that duration really solid. And then you've got to start building that distance in. And for the handlers who their dogs are like little Klingons, they want to be with them like all the time, the dog will creep toward them. So we have to build that dog's confidence. You can't be telling that dog off for following the handler. You're going to create all sorts of negative associations if you do that. For me, if the dog is coming toward the handler, it's not confident and it needs reassurance, and it needs its confidence built in being apart from the handler, not being told off for following the handler, which I think is where a lot of people go wrong. They get frustrated because they're trying to do this sit stay at distance and the dog just wants to be back with them. Now, if your dog gets off and disappears into the horizon, that's a whole different ball game. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a dog who wants to be with the handler. So they're like creeping in on the handler in that sit stay.
Yeah, and like for a lot of us, we might think, oh, I would love to have a dog that stays around my feet. If you've got the dog that bogs off, and if you've got the dog that's constantly around your feet, like you said, you were like, I would just wish you would go to somewhere like at least 20 meters away from me without being like this. So yeah, I can see how you're explaining a very different scenario with the same problem. So for the ones where the dog is like, actually, I am 20 meters away, and now I am going to do what the heck I like. What are we dealing with there?
You could be dealing with one or two things. And a nice example of this is the stop whistle. With the stop whistle at distance, some dogs go into hunt mode and then literally the ears are shut. The dog's not hearing the stop whistle. They're in that hunting mindset. They're out there looking for the thing and they're oblivious to the handler. Genuinely, sometimes the dogs are oblivious to the handler blowing their stop whistle, which says to me, you've got to shorten that distance down and incrementally build that distance back up with your stop whistle. And in our lesson plans that we do on the LWDG, that's all covered. How to achieve that is all covered. But for me, that's one scenario. Now, another scenario is if the dog hears the stop whistle at distance and that stop whistle indicates to the dog that they failed, they start getting frantic and panicky. And you'll see a very different kind of hunt pattern happen then. The dog looks frantic, manic. They're not holding an area. They're not really looking. They're in a little bit of a crazy moment in their head. Just, I need to find the thing really quick. I've heard the stop whistle, which means I haven't found it and I failed. So with those dogs, again, you've got to shorten the distance, but you've got to build the dog's confidence that the stop whistle is a precursor to finding the thing, not a precursor to being told you haven't found the thing or being told off for not stopping. So there's a lot of things going on there. And it's really in the moment, reading that dog's body language and deciphering why the dog isn't stopping at distance.
It's really interesting what you said there, because if Rex is out hunting and doing a perfect job as always, and Ella goes to run in and I call Ella back, because he knows or thinks Ella could possibly be coming to find it for him and that he is going to fail because she will find it way before he will. He goes frantic. He literally, exactly like you said, he hunts, but he's not hunting properly. I know he can't, he'll pass over it. I'll see him pass over it. And then he'll come back to the edge of the bracken or wherever it is, and he'll look at me, and then he'll run back in, and I'm like, you just got to calm down now a minute, kid. I've managed to bring her back. But yeah, it's amazing how much they want to please and how much when they think they're not pleasing us, their confidence goes downhill.
Very rarely do I see a dog who ignores the stop whistle at distance to just be naughty. It's usually because that has been built with an association of something. So a lot of dogs, they're sent out and I see them hunting and they look really nice hunting and they're not finding it. So the handler starts to get a bit flustered. They're like, why is the dog not finding the thing? What you just described with Ella and Rex there was a brilliant example, but it's for Rex, that's like, Ella's on her way. I must find it quickly. So the handler starts to get frustrated and they're thinking, why is the dog not finding the thing? Sometimes they're not considering, is the wind in the dog's favor or is it against the dog? Has the dummy perhaps fallen into a hole? This actually happened at the weekend. We were running a retriever working test, training day, and mock test. And on one of the dog's tests, the dummy fell into a hole under a branch. So the dog was like hunting and hunting, and she was listening so beautifully, but there was no way she was going to locate that dummy. The dummy had, and that could happen. So the handler might not be even aware that the dummy has perhaps fallen in a hole or into a drainage ditch that the handler can't even see. There's 1,000 scenarios. But for whatever reason, because of things that have perhaps happened in the training, maybe the dog's ignored the stop whistle and the handler has got cross and gone out and maybe not handled that in the best way that they could have done. So then when the dog hears the stop whistle in that scenario, they think, oh no, I failed. I'm going to be in trouble. I've not found the thing. So that's when you get that frantic thing, which is what you saw with Rex. But his was because he heard you trying to get Ella back. And he's thinking in his head, oh no, Ella's going to get the thing. I have to get the thing. And so we sometimes forget how dogs perceive what we're saying to them in the moment.
And it is mad, isn't it? Look, just to talk about that scenario that you were discussing there, we get very frustrated as a whole on certain things. I have been adamant sometimes that a dummy is in a certain position. I've saw it land and I've not moved and I'm sure it's there. And then the dog's not found it and I've walked out and I'm like, it's not here. And I might have been like, and tennis balls even worse, literally tennis balls in fern, you might as well give up sometimes. They're just gone, right? They've buried themselves somewhere. But I suppose for a dog, if they love their job and they want to do well, if they can't find it, they feel like they're letting us down.
Yeah, they do. And they so want to please most of the time. Very rarely a dog's not doing the thing to wind us up. They want to please us, and that's why sometimes they get panicky and start to act erratically because they're like so desperate to please. And I think this is why in training, obviously at working test you can't do this, but in training I will praise each element a lot, because I want the dog to be told each thing they're doing is correct in case something then does go wrong. I don't want the whole thing to be forgotten. So let's just look at, say you've sent your dog out on a memory or a blind retrieve and they've taken a beautiful line out and you've told them to stop in an area and hunt, and they do that. I'm going to praise that piece, even though they've not finished. There's a caveat on that. Unless the dog believes your praise is not a keep on, but thinks it's a release. That's the only time you can't do it. So there is a little caveat on that. But that's another topic, Joe. But I'll praise that and I'll then tell the dog to keep hunting. And if the dog keeps hunting, and I will occasionally maybe say, good girl, to keep her going, because I want her to know she's doing a great job. Because if, like you just described, the dummy isn't there, maybe I've mismarked where it is, or it's fallen down a hole and I have to go and help the dog. I don't want the dog to in any way not understand that all of those things she did first were right. I want her to know they were right.
Yeah, and if you look at this in line with, shall we say, old-fashioned training, I don't like to use the word traditional training now because there's a lot of good traditional training. But if we look at old-fashioned training, and I saw with my dad, the dog would go out and you'd be like, leave the dog alone. I assume very much because he was always training to trial. Silence. Do not talk to the dog. Do not talk to the dog. And then I started out with that. But then they go a long time, and especially if they've not got confidence, they've got a long time not hearing anything from you.
Yeah, no feedback, no feedback. So then if something does go wrong and you have to appropriately correct the dog in whatever way that is for that dog in that moment, there's been no feedback on all the brilliant stuff that happened before that. And I think that's really important in training, is that feedback, and that sort of thing can make or break the control you have at distance.
If you think about it, it's the difference between training with a driving instructor or training with a driving examiner, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
where is the feedback? Where is your encouragement? And you, like you said, you do need that. What about the dogs? And they do exist, where the minority, where they're like, I'm enough away from you that you can't get hold of me. So
Yeah.
now I will do whatever I want.
Yeah, with those dogs, the first thing I will do is close down the distance to the distance that I know I can control that dog. And I will get everything right at that distance. And I will then add on literally 5 yards at a time, literally, so that I gradually, incrementally show the dog that I'm still under control, even at distance. I think it's very often that the handlers have jumped from close to 200 yards. Some dogs, there are a few like that. Very few are genuinely like that, but there are some. And with those dogs, you've got to incrementally increase that distance at a rate where you're still under control. And if the dog starts to lose control, you've got to bring that distance back down. Now, there are things you can do. It might be that it would be useful to pop a long line on that dog for a duration of time, so that if they start ignoring you, you can do something about it quicker. It might be that you control the area. So for dogs that have a tendency to hunt and start hunting frantically and just ignore, and it is ignoring as opposed to losing confidence or panicking, I will get them to hunt small areas that are quite contained, so maybe a fence on at least 2 sides, so that I can contain the area they're in, so that if they start ignoring, I can get close enough to get their attention and then stop them. But with those dogs, what's really super important is that those dogs start to learn that you're the one that provides the rewards, not just go in with correction, because those dogs need to see a value in listening. They do need to see a value in it. So with them sorts of dogs, I will do a lot of work of sending them into the area, getting them hunting. And when they stop, I am the one that provides the reward for stopping, not the environment. And if you do that enough times, the dog will start to go, hang on a minute, it's worth listening to her. The reward always happens really quickly after I listen to her. So you have to change the mindset of the dog. And I think too often with dogs like that, people think that the dog is hard-headed. It's not. It's just that they don't see the value in listening, and we have to teach them the value in listening. It's not just about correcting the dog in situations like that. Does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah, completely, because I suppose I've been lucky, but I've not known a dog to have a recall problem. And that's, I think, due to the fact that, again, my dad, from as young as I can remember with the dogs on the farm, he would always say, if you give them a row when they're coming back to you, they're never coming back to you. Yeah, it's knowing that, isn't it? Even though there's days, I suppose people who've got horses understand, there's times for horses, you've got a bucket, and the dog and the horse would be like, I know there's nothing in that bucket, so I'm going to run back and forth the field, back and forth the field. Because they've learned that the behavior is you show them the bucket, there's nothing in the bucket, there is no reward. But if you've got food in that bucket, chances are they're coming back in. So it's that thought that, not that we don't need to correct, because we do need to correct, but this recall might be the one where you need to be really patient and really ready to have a better thing than the environment.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's that whole sexier than a squirrel thing, isn't it? We can't be sexier than a squirrel. I don't have a bushy tail. I say this with jest. Anyway, I really don't have a bushy tail, but yes, I still say it in jest. But I think, yes, for recall and stop whistle, we are competing with big motivators out there, And I think the more you can build value in the recall and the stop whistle, and the more you can build reward history and success with the recall and the stop whistle, the more consistent that it becomes. If you only recall your dog at the end of the walk, or because they've done something wrong, you're creating a very negative association with that recall. And equally, if you recall your dog, and this goes for the stop whistle and the recall, those two things are quite connected in terms of distance. If you recall your dog or you stop whistle your dog and it doesn't do it immediately, but you then give them a second chance, so you recall again or blow the stop whistle again and the dog then does it, you can't correct the dog. You can't. And people do. You see handlers doing this all the time. They blow the stop whistle once or they recall the dog once and the dog doesn't do it. They get really cross and they start getting closer to the dog, which technically they need to get closer. But then they give that command again, the recall or the stop, but they're still angry at the dog. So then if the dog's recalled in on that second recall and you're like, you should have come back first time, what are you doing? That was a very bad decision to do that to that dog, because now you've created a very negative association with coming back to you. The same with the stop whistle. If you've stopped the dog and they've ignored you and then you blow it, you decide to blow it that second time and the dog does stop the second time, but you're still cross and you walk out and you tell the dog off because it didn't stop, you're creating a negative association with the stop whistle. So if you make that decision to give that cue or command again and the dog follows through, you've got to praise the dog. You have to praise the dog. You cannot punish the dog for that. And I think this is where people forget, because human emotions get in the way, frustration gets in the way, and they're then correcting or punishing things unnecessarily and creating a lot of damage along the way. And I see this all the time on delivery of the dummy as well. A lot of the dogs I see that are reluctant retrievers or have delivery issues have a very negative association with this close proximity and space of the dog. I've really babbled, Joe.
Oh, I think you've made some absolutely like essential points around how we treat them, because like you said, if they're not coming back to you, why are they not coming back to you? We covered this in last week's podcast. What is it that you're maybe doing without thinking, and how can you think about them better? But also, I suppose for a lot of dogs, when they're being recalled, it's a bit boring as well, because it means, oh, whatever I'm doing, which is super fun, like you said, a huge motivator, I might now be asked to sit for 5 minutes, or I might be put in the car, or I might be put in the crate. They are weighing up the odds just as we weigh up the odds whether we want to do something or not.
100%. And this is why on our masterclass on the LWDG, our masterclass recall and the chasing recall, you see these demonstrations of playing with the dog for the recall, of building, driving the dog on the recall, because those things are so super important. Because if the recall always means the end of fun or the end of the session that the dog's loving, then the dog will start to not want to recall, because they're like, why would I recall? You're going to end everything I'm loving right now. I'm having the best time. Indy, I remember years ago, bless her heart, Indy's almost 12 now, but when she was probably about 5 or 6, there would be something in my body language on the last retrieve that told her it was the last retrieve. And she would stand at a distance from me holding the dummy, stand off as if to go, this had better not be the last retrieve, mother. And so I had to really look at what I was doing and change my body language and kind of make it so that she didn't know if it was the last retrieve, because she had that much drive to do the thing that she was like, I don't want this to be over. You're going to put me in the car and you're going to get the other dog out and you're going to do it with the other dog, and I don't want to watch.
Toddlers in a park though, isn't it? Like you see them, their parents go, it's almost a tone. It goes from, I don't know, would you like this sweet? It goes, Claire, and there's something in it that says, this is me telling you without thinking that we are getting in that car. And kids are like, not a chance, screaming, running away. But it comes down to how we deliver the command.
Yeah, it's how we deliver the command and how we deliver the reward and how we end the thing with the dog. And I think this is the thing. Gundog training is really technical, isn't it? It's really technical. And other disciplines are really technical as well. But we always give a wee little cues to the dog in our body language and things that we say or do that tell the dog that it's about to be over. And for a dog who's like really driven, that's like the worst thing in the world. That's punishment. It's like, don't let it be over. I don't want it to be over. So we have to really be mindful of that sort of thing. And just be super mindful that we're telling the dog when they're getting these things right all the time.
How important would you say environmental factors like new surroundings, other animals, other smells, how do they like trigger different behaviors in our dogs? How much?
Yeah, it can really affect some dogs. And I have to say, it will affect dogs more that are in the learning phase of training. When you're proofing, that's exactly what you're doing. You're taking that learned behavior or learned exercise that you've done and you're proofing it. And so you're going to see things. And it could be that, for all we know, a female in heat has walked across the field 10 minutes before you've got there, and your entire male has walked on the field and is like, oh, this is amazing. We're completely unaware of that. The thing is, through training and repetition and through building successful reward histories, our dogs learn to cope with those things better and better. But that's not to say they won't throw us curveballs, and these things will not sometimes get in the way. Sometimes these things will create an issue or will get in the way of the training or create a little bit of a disturbance in the training. I have it at the moment with Rose because of her phantom pregnancies and her hormones. She's very distracted by scent of other dogs' wee. Very distracted. She's almost wanting to be boyish and scent marking. And I'm having to be really super clear with her in my cues and in my commands and in my way of training her, that I'm teaching her you can only do these things when you're on your free time. When you're working with me, you can't do these things. No different to what I'd do with a male dog. You know, with a male dog, they can't go around cocking their leg whilst they're on a retrieve, because if you wanted to enter competition, there's a big fat zero for you straight away. So I'm almost having to educate her similar to how I would a male dog who's got that tendency. And it's stuff that's going on in her head, things that are going on in her head. And I'm not in her head, but I have to get in her head. And so it's reading that body language, seeing the moment where, you know, she starts to lose focus and she's thinking of other things. And I've got to be able to get in there and get her attention and get her back on board with me. And so, yeah, it is something that is a challenge. And of course, the further away from your dog you are, the harder it is to interrupt that.
Yeah, fabulous. Talk about a little bit about when owners should seek professional assistance for dogs' behavior issues. Because I don't want us to gloss over everything and just say, and I know this is not what we're saying, but be more fun, it'll all be fine. We're not glossing over it like that. When is it a case of the dog needs you to get some extra help?
Yeah. I think an additional set of eyes is always a bonus. If it's somebody that you trust and you agree with their methods and you like their training, and it's somebody that you can get on with and talk to. And I go to a trainer myself. I go and see Abby with Rose, and you can't beat getting that second opinion or the eyes on, but especially if you're a pet dog owner and you've got behavioral issues going on and training challenges because of behavioral issues, seeking out help from a trainer who can help you understand not just the symptom, but the root cause of those symptoms is really important. A lot of trainers, I don't mean this derogatory, Joe, at all, but a lot of trainers just train a skill set without really considering the root cause behind the symptom. A lot of the time, what in training is a symptom of an underlying factor. So it's important that you're considering what the underlying factor is to be able to change behavior. Does that make sense?
Yeah, if you think of everything we do within our membership, it literally is about every week, Emma Liddell steps forward and tries to work hard to change human mindset. So
Yeah.
why we would think it'd be any different for our dogs, we wouldn't. We know that both mindsets need confidence. Both mindsets need to work as one. Those things take time and they certainly take developing.
Yeah, 100%. So I think as a handler, if you're looking for a trainer to help you, ask that trainer, say, what are your methods? How would you go about fixing these problems? And if they're just all about correcting a symptom and not trying to understand the dog's emotion and the root cause behind the dog's behavior, then personally I'd steer clear. Your trainer should be someone that's working with you to understand your dog's behavior and to get to the root cause and change things from the underneath up. If you just mask over a behavior by punishing the dog to get it to a result on a thing, you're going to probably create more behavior problems under the surface that are going to bubble up. You might be creating a lot of frustration in the dog, confusion in the dog, fear in the dog. And that's not to say we can't correct a dog. Yes, of course, we must correct the dog for behaviors that are unacceptable. But we have to firstly understand the root cause to be able to come up with the best way to work with that dog.
Yeah, because if even listening to you, I always learn so much. But I'm thinking, okay, one of the things I could do when I'm out with Ellen, I'm working so hard for Ella not to run in. Maybe I'm not thinking about the fact that she doesn't have to not run in on everyone. I can put her on the lead for some so that he doesn't have that worry. Because we talk about what do we know, what don't we know, what are we observant of. I'm probably 50% aware that if Ella's having a great time and she's retrieving well, she wants every retrieve if she's in that mood. So I can know what day we're having. Those days could be you're staying on the lead kid when he's out there, because otherwise you're going to ruin it for him. And then maybe doing more work. Like, again, I tend to train them together, normally because I'm on the side of a mountain and without a vehicle. So I don't have the capability of running away, but I do have the capability of tying her to a tree next to me. So we stand somewhere and I know that my thought process, my observation can be on him and not what is she doing. Even things like that. And I'm sure as listeners are listening to this, they're thinking, okay, but what if I try that? What if I try that? And a lot of what we talk about is trial and error to work out, like you said, what's causing what I'm seeing.
Yeah, 100%. Exactly. And what you just said was spot on. So with Ella, if I was training her with Rex, if they were my dogs and I'd be training, I would probably be, pegging her so that she's learning to be steady by my side, but so that Rex isn't interfered and then we haven't got detrimental things happening to Rex. And then it might be, okay, Rex is going to do something super simple now. So actually, I'm going to try her off lead for this one. And then just see how that's going, work that into it and be flexible, but so that both dogs are getting the ability to get things right. Definitely.
Claire, if you lived near her, we'd be with you every week.
That would be beautiful, wouldn't it? It would be
if I didn't have to drive like 14 hours. Yeah, it would be beautiful. To close up this conversation, what sort of final advice or encouragement would you give to listeners struggling with their dog's behaviour?
At distance. That's the case. So, firstly, work out if your dog is a Klingon. And if your dog is a Klingon, work on separation in environments where you can manage it more easily, in the home, in the garden, before expecting the dog to be able to do it on the field. If your dog is showing you body language that at distance they are having a ball and just ignoring you, take that distance down, and then build it back up. Just as I said, 5 yards at a time so that your dog learns to listen, but make sure the dog is learning there's value in listening to you. If your dog is the sort of dog who at distance gets a bit worried and frantic if you recall them or try and stop them because they feel like they've failed, make sure that you are praising each element that's going right en route to the thing. And again, praise them when they get it right. And if in doubt, find yourself an amazing trainer to help you see what's really going on with your dog.
I definitely think off the back of this, there's a masterclass on building your dog's confidence if he's a Klingon. I can see that being something that goes down.
You know what? It is such a common thing. I think it could be easily a masterclass because it's such a common problem. The least problem is dogs that are genuinely ignorant at distance. That's the least. The most common is Klingon, followed by, oh, I'm out here and now I failed and I don't know what to do and I'm going to be silly. So I think there is a masterclass in that for sure.
We'll definitely align that up. We're in the planning for our members. For those of you who are listening, I hope you've enjoyed. Please go to our social media at Ladies Working Dogs on Instagram, Ladies Working Dog Group on Facebook. Give us a hashtag Klingon so that we know that you have listened and you know all of what we have been on about. Give us your feedback. We do appreciate it, and we shall speak to you all next week. Thank you very much, Claire. It's been incredible as always. That's it for today's episode. A massive thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to head over to the LWDG and sign up for our membership. Get access to expert-led training, a wonderfully supportive community, and the resources you need to become a confident and skilled gun dog trainer. Let's take this journey together, because no woman should have to train her gun dog alone. We'll see you all next week.